Yo, so welcome back to the podcast.
Yo, it's an absolute pleasure. It always is. I'm
Of
like,
course,
this
bro.
defines what my life should be like. It really expresses everything I've always wanted to do in my life. This podcast expresses that for me. Even if there's 5 people listening right now, let's say in the future, I'm sure there might be millions, there might be hundreds, there might be thousands, there might be hundreds of thousands. It doesn't matter. To me, one person can shift the entire planet. So
Mm.
that to me is the most important aspect of it. One mind, one person, the Tesla principle, microparticle, a microfractional aspect of existence can generate infinite energy. So one person can change the whole planet. It just really depends on how you're looking at it. But I think today, like you were saying, you wanted us to get into the roots of how language structures reality. And that to me is so primordial. And I happen to be
Mhm.
an expert in that field academically, neo-colonially, but also decolonially.
Mm.
So I'm a PhD in translation studies, and which specializes also in studying the roots of languages. So I speak a number of different languages, 3 main ones that are colonial, but I also have, as a birthright, I have about 16 or 18 different languages. Native ones, my whole diaspora, like yours, is very expensive.
Mm.
So it's crazy because language, the way I've studied it, even in a colonial institution in higher education and university at a PhD level, they explain to you that language structures reality. So, depending on the language that we speak, according to the Sapir-Whorf hypothesis, which I can't even tell you the history of Sapir or Whorf. I don't know who those people are. But what I can tell you is that they posited in neo-colonial times or in colonial times that language structures the nature of our reality. And me speaking in English right now is structuring the reality that we're comprehending, but also seeing. But at the very least, that we're understanding the language creates the reality we see. So if you say I love you versus je t'aime or ich liebe die
Mm.
or koshitara or aishitara
Mm.
or let's say konronkwa or gisasaheten or kitsika komim, all those are different, completely different semantic structures,
Mm.
each of which have a symbol that hieroglyphically or pictographically depict a different reality about what love is. And so I love you alone only structures one form of reality. But if you say I love you, je t'aime, te amo, konoronqua, you say whatever it is, it's all different. Like the letters have practically in different languages. Ich liebe die in German, nothing in common with I love you, other than the I maybe and the E that you don't even hear. But it's crazy because everything structures like
Let's talk
if you
about
were
from
to
birth.
say,
Like
yeah,
from
please.
birth. From birth, like we're implanted with like this language that structures our whole world, especially like going to school and how everything is associated with language. Go deeper on that.
Yo, please. So, okay, so in the neo-residential institutions, especially in residential schools, which shut down in the late 90s in Canada and in the US, um, they eradicated indigenous languages from peoples. They banned them from speaking their home languages, their origin languages, because they didn't want them to structure reality in a decolonial sense, in an
Mhm.
anti-colonial sense. They didn't want them to be able to create a reality that was militant, that was activist, that was against colonialism. So they force languages. This is like, it's like if somebody is like, love is shit. Now say shit. That means I shit you. It means I love you. That's basically what colonial languages did to it. They told us freedom was slavery. They told us that, you know, love was hatred. They told us that love was fucking. They told us that, you know, jealousy was exclusivity in relationships. They told us have one love, one book, one friend, one lover, one this, one that, one life, one, you know, and then everything else after that is whatever. But
Mm.
it's ridiculous because it doesn't make sense. If you think about relationships and structures to languages, it's like saying there's one word, there's one ultimate word. For example, good example of that, ISKCON, the International Society for Krishna Consciousness in India, which isn't Hinduism. Like, it's not Hinduism. It's not Indian tradition. It's not Dharma Sanatana. Different. It's a sectarian division of Hinduism, which is insect. You know, it's a sectarian division. But they claim that there's only one mantra you need to speak to free yourself from everything. And ideally, you should only say, you know, Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Rama. Like it's I'm not even speaking it properly. But the point is, they're saying this is the only words you need to speak to be freed from existence. But that's oppression because they're telling you that you can only speak maybe 10 words and everything else is essentially banned. They're saying everything else is ridiculous. This is the only words you need. These are the only words you need to speak in order to be freed from colonial reality. But
Mm.
the illusion from that is that it's limiting your conscious capacity so much that we can't even fathom how much it's stupefying us. It's making us into stupid people because
Yeah, go
it's
deeper
like
on that.
somebody saying this one paragraph, this one line from the book is the only thing you should think of your whole life. So somebody says, um, you know, praise be to this person. Praise be to Muhammad. Praise be to Jesus. Praise be to Krishna. Praise be to someone. That's all you need to know, and everything will be fine and you'll be good. But that doesn't solve life's equation. It doesn't solve the riddle of existence. But then if you say, you know, if you're already saying in Sanskrit, Hare Krishna versus praise be to Krishna. Praise be to Krishna sounds almost like an apocryphal biblical verse. It doesn't sound the same as Hare Krishna. Hare means the divine feminine, but hair in our own traditions means a wild rabbit. So wild rabbits and Hare, they have a distant etymological link. They're linked together through indigenous wilderness and Dravidian traditions. But then most people would be like, no, that's why etymology is fascinating. I was forced to study Roman and Greek, like Latin and Greek, in my college. And I entered college when I was I was about 10 years old when I came into college. I was a very early blossoming person. I was almost 6 foot tall already when I entered college. I was 120 pounds. I was selling marijuana. I was skateboarding, doing graffiti, smoking marijuana, selling marijuana, drinking. I was stealing Colt 45s from my corner store. You know, I was doing crazy shit. But I
Wow.
realized already the language was structuring reality in an unconscious way.
Mm.
Anyways, this is a roundabout way to get on the thing. But like, si je te dis tout de suite, tu comprends, si je te dis, je te commence à te parler en français, puis je te dis, bon, ça c'est ma langue, c'est la raison pour laquelle je structure la réalité. People that don't grasp French will be like, this is garbage, this is garbled stuff. I don't know what's going on. I don't know what's happening. That's because it's structuring a different reality. It, French is a Romance language. It's based on Latin as a dead tongue, but it's a Romance language that evolved Latin. So, déjà, y si te hablo en español, si es posible llegar a ti que soy un chicano, soy mexicano, soy un poquito soy iberiano, soy de las tribus de Iris. De esta manera es posible llegar que las lenguas son la estructura de la realidad.
Wait, so what was your original birth language? Like, what language did you speak growing up?
French, but then I learned English and French both because my mother's first colonial tongue was French and my father's first colonial tongue was English, but they both spoke about 8 different languages.
Wow, that's amazing.
Yeah, it is, but they never taught me any of them. I'm lucky I even learned languages. Like I can speak other languages glossalically, academically, in a certain sense in my raps, but I'm not.
Here, bro,
I'm not a
let me tell you
polyglot.
something. So what I was reading about was like most of the kings and queens back like in the time where there were kings and queens, most of them didn't even speak a language. Like they were just so in a higher state of consciousness without language that they didn't need all of the language to speak. Like the same language that the city was using, the kings and queens actually didn't even speak all of the language in that way. And I was just thinking about like if you were to go back to your grandmother's grandmother, if you like keep going down in the lineage, you would get to a point where there's no language and there's just you're just existing in a
Exactly.
realm. It's just a realm. So there's no language. And everything is based off of understanding the reality through your internal senses and through your intuition in that way. So that's why like I'm interested in how thoughts can connect with language and how that works in the conscious sense. But let's also talk more about what it's like to just exist in a realm with complete language. Like, for example, like learning like the etymology of words, you get a deeper meaning of the words, and then it basically opens the reality up more. It's like you're opening up a book within yourself. So yeah, explain more about that and how limited language is in this current time and how much more can really be explored.
Beautiful, beautiful transition. I love this because, like, that's exactly what it is. Telepathy, telekinesis,
Hmm.
pathokinesis, all the aspects. Pathokinesis at the end of the day is what you're speaking about. So, language without language is pathokinesis, it's shifting emotions on a supernatural level, on an extrasensory perception level, which is allowing us to tap into our inner selves to express our emotions directly to somebody else without using coded words, coded structures to define what our emotions are. So when you look at someone and you're like, wow, you connect with them instantly. You're like, wow, this person, I love them. They're amazing. That's pathokinesis. You're shifting their emotional state. They're shifting your emotional state. This is far beyond language. In the future, in which coexists with the present in a quantum sense, in a nonlinear time sense, which is like a time warp in the pineal gland. We comprehend. I should say we comprehend that we are essentially all interconnected through emotional vibrational frequencies, which are far more complex than language could ever be in a structured phonetic sense. So the phonemes, the structures, the phonetics, the phonemics and the phonetics of our language, they're structured in a way which is very colonially primitive compared to what we can do, except for indigenous languages. Indigenous languages express that reality in a very artful sense, which at the end of the day, English, which we're using right now, ironically, to communicate, is actually the most hegemonic, the most colonial, the most dominant, the most globally pervasive language which has ever been known to humankind since Babylonian.
Mm,
And in the times of Babylon, that's when they had the confusion of tongues. Everyone was blamed in the Bible for speaking one tongue and for wanting to unite against this God who didn't want us to be like him.
mm,
But that's ridiculous, because if we were made in his image, why wouldn't he want us to actually become like him? If he's afraid of us becoming like him, but we're made in his image, then that means it's like an angry, resentful father who doesn't want us to be like he is, doesn't want us to have his power, doesn't want us to have his awareness, his like, but at the end of the day, angry, frustrated, resentful parents, they're outdated relics of this society.
mm,
But language structures in that way in the same sense, because we are who we are based on linguistic reality. We structure everything we're saying right now is defining the reality of what we're living. This is what's restructuring the nature of existence. But if we only know one language, it's like having one operating system on a computer. It's like if you're like, I've got Windows. Windows is like English. So somebody else is like, I've got Linux. Linux would be like some kind of a Métis language, like maybe Creole or Patois or Pidgin or Michif, something like that. It's like non-commercial, non-corporate, non-political. It's another language which is free, which is accessible, but which most people don't seem to use unless they're specialized in that particular area.
mm,
But what's wonderful with that is that there's no there's no spyware, there's no malware, there's a lot less, barely any. There's no contamination, there's no, but most people are like, but Windows is so aware, it's so available, it's so there, it's easy to use, it's easy to access, but it costs money, it charges you. You have to pay even when the computers are sold with Windows on them. Windows tags on a price to add Windows on it. But
mm.
LibreOffice is free. Libre, like Libre, LRB, BRE, sorry, LIBRE Office is free. It,
Oh
it
yeah,
means
I
free
think I've heard of it.
office.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Hmm.
So you can download that. You can download Ubuntu, you can download Linux, you can download anything like that and start using an independent operating system, which is not linked into Bill Gates and world domination and New World Order. But most people are like, yeah, but that's complicated. I don't know how it works. I don't know what's going on. It's like learning an indigenous language,
Mm,
like, or a Métis language. It's like being like, oh, I don't, it's too complicated. I don't know Plains Cree. I don't know Mohawk. I don't know, Kwakiutl. I don't know Nahuatl. I don't know Tagalog. I
mm,
don't know these languages, so it's too complicated for me to learn. So I'm going to stick to English. But
mm,
they've been forcing conversions since, residential schools in English language, especially English, even French as a Romance language is a Métis language. It's been used, it's a dominant colonial language. Back in the days, it was used as a language for diplomacy and for business relationships. But it's been shifted around since then. And it's more of a Métis language now because it's too romantically, too emotionally complex for people to try to box in. And so
mm,
you can shift it around and use it. English has been repurposed through poetry, but so the Sapir-Whorf hypothesis essentially posits that all languages structure reality, and each language structures it differently. And that to me makes entire sense because each symbol means something different.
mm. Talk more about how the past, how like somebody's past can be rewritten through language and through external manipulations.
So I would posit that this is very similar to the biogenetic restructuring or the biochemical restructuring of the body through epigenetics. In science, epigenetics is said to skip 2 generations. Now, you can imagine language would be similar in that sense, but even quicker, because in 1 generation, a language can skip. But then in 2 generations, according to epigenetics, language can skip completely to something different depending on who's teaching you what you're learning. So I would say epigenetically, language restructures itself according to a similar principle. If you hate the language you were born with, you don't need to keep it, but you can also repurpose it in a way that's beneficial to you, to your community, to the people around you, poetically, creatively, artistically, even linguistically. You can repurpose that in a way where you're using it anti-colonially, decolonially. You're using it against the system. But the key word there is, system, like anti-systemic. So
Mm.
the key word is being against the system, which is in place, which is colonial, which is structured. So you use languages. You can use the most oppressive form. It's like somebody trying to stab you with a knife. You grab the knife from them and then you stab them back. That's the language that they colonized us with. English is 55% French. The rest of it, I think almost 30%, is other languages from around the world. At the end of the day, English is barely even anything original in it. But they would convince people that this is the most effective method of communication based on aggressive dissemination of linguistic boundaries.
Mm.
So, or linguistic semantic fields.
Explain how manifestation works with language. Like from my knowledge, if your heart is linked up with your mind and that all connects with your soul and it connects with what you're speaking with a pure heart, and if you've connected to yourself in that way, then over time, what you do speak into the reality will eventually become real in that sense, like in a third dimensional
Yes.
sense. So
Yes.
yeah,
So
go deeper on that. Go deeper on that, bro.
so that connects to the throat chakra, Vishuddha, right? Which is the throat chakra. But they don't explain that there's a mouth chakra. I never even came up with a word, a Sanskrit word. I should have thought of one. Um, you know, call it Boka chakra if you want, like just in terms of like Taino language, but like the chakra of the mouth, essentially. But that language manifesting through the vibrational frequencies of the vocal cords is actually what linguistically manifests the energy which is in your body, which is related to what our nutrition is, which comes back to how vital nutrition is. And if you have vital nutrition, you have 80% of your body, which is water, approximately 70 to 90%, depending on the people's, you know, vibrational frequency, their, let's say, their different signs. If they're fire, if they're water, if they're earth, if they're something. If they're water, they might be up to 90% water in their body.
Hmm.
They might be, if they're fire, they might be 70% water in their body. But either way, all the elements in our bodies, all the nutrition we're ingesting, everything that we're doing, speaking, thinking, eating, drinking, it's all affecting how we speak, and it manifests through the throat chakra, which then manifests through the mouth chakra, which we're told doesn't even exist.
Mhm.
But in India, they know the mouth chakra exists. In India, they know the nose chakra, the mouth chakra, the ear chakras. They know the ultimate chakras that go above the head and the crown chakra, like you know, uh, Upasuryaka, Bahaisana. Like there's other chakras. There's 36 main chakras in the body which connect with the marmas that are this considered to be 108 marmas in the bodies. Those are minor energy points which can develop into major energy points. It's kind of like somebody saying, your arm isn't that strong. Your muscle is small. But if you work out your muscle so much, it becomes a major muscle. It becomes a lot bigger
Mhm.
physically. The chakras are the same principle. You can work out your energetic centers, but then
Mhm.
people don't realize how many chakras we have in our bodies. So we have three different levels of energetic centers. You have the chakras, those are the principal energy centers in the body. There's 36 of those according to traditional Indian beliefs. But in the Western realm, we're told there's only 7, which is only 7 in the spinal cord, which doesn't even represent the whole spinal nadis. Spinal nadis, there's 9 of them. And then we have the rest of the body, which is like the elbows, the hands, the knees, the feet, the ears, the mouth. And then you have the ones above your body, which represents the projection of your crown chakra. So there's 36 chakras in the body, but we're told there's 7. In Tibetan traditions, they say there's 6. That's patriarchal Tibetan Buddhism. It's wrong. In Shinto, they know there's infinite chakras. In India, there knows as infinite chakras. But then they say there's marmas. Marmas, 108 of those, which corresponds to the names of the divine feminine. And then there's the nadis, which is, I forget, it's like hundreds of thousands of nadis. Those are very minor energy points all around the body, like microcosmic black holes and quasars coexisting in harmony. But how language fits into that, to me, is that language and the structures of the symbols of the language are not that different from the chemical composition of our bodies. We are structured, like, for example, to give a very valid example of that in a physical sense, I have wa, which means harmony and peace in Japanese, on my cheek. That's my body says harmony and peace in a language which is structured in my physical biochemical composition. So tattoos are very interesting because art brings reality to unreality, it brings unreality to reality, rather. It brings a supernatural realm into the natural. So nobody in nature has tattoos, but those tattoos are a part of natural evolution in indigenous tribes. So I don't know where I'm going with this exactly, and I just want to mention really quickly, which I've said to you before, but I've had 14 beers and about 3 grams of hash. Now, most people would be like, you should be blacked out on a couch. You might be in a hospital. I'm like, no, but supernatural poison training is a thing which in Bushido training, in ninjutsu training, in certain forms of martial arts, which are more hardcore, like Muay Thai, you have to train yourself for poison resistance. So if I sound a little bit, the reason why my throat is awkward is because I've been smoking a lot of hash and indigenous tobacco, like natural mapacho. But to me, these are resistance training situations in which if I ever ended up in a situation where somebody was trying to trick me, poison me, or something like that, I would laugh my ass off. And then somebody would put strychnine or chlorine or cyanide, unless they were extremely lethal dosages in my food, I could survive it because I've trained for it. It's the same with language structuring reality. If you've trained in many different languages, you've learned many different, kind of like the poisons. Like colonial languages are like the poisons. Indigenous languages are like the remedies. So if you've learned how to master the poisons and you've learned how to heal yourself with the remedies, you have a balance between both, which allows you to be practically invincible. And then you can restructure your reality in whichever way you wish it, as long as it's according to cosmic principles.
Go deeper on cosmic principles.
So cosmic principles, to me,
We'll do a whole
very
different
importantly,
podcast on this. We'll do a whole different episode on this, but just try to sum it up. Yeah.
That's wonderful.
Yeah.
So cosmic principles, to me, they're like the laws of Ma'at. the laws of Isfet. In ancient Egypt, 42 laws of Ma'at. I can't even speak them to you right now. I barely remember a single one. They're very similar to the Old Testament laws, being expansively more expansive and more realistic than the Old Testament laws. So thou shalt not kill, thou shalt not steal, thou shalt not rape, thou shalt not kill, thou shalt not covet thy neighbor, thou shalt not covet thy neighbor's goods, those kind of things, but like in a much more polymorphic indigenous sense. Because back in those days, nobody was coveting their neighbor's goods. Nobody was stealing. Nobody was raping. There was no word for rape in indigenous languages. There were no words for abuse in indigenous languages because nobody knew what abuse was. So indigenous cultures were living in harmony with nature. And then suddenly colonial cultures came over from alien planets, from leftover remnants of other galaxies, who knows where, and started poisoning reality with their realities of rape and torture and genocide and abuse. And they started claiming that these words existed, and they made them into existence by making them that. So
Okay,
the
bro,
cosmic
I'm gonna interrupt
principle to
you.
me,
Yo, bro, I'm gonna
yeah,
interrupt you. Rewind a bit like that, talking about how the language got corrupted in that way by ETs, you could say.
you could say that. You could say they're like weird, the same ETs that control religions.
Hmm.
When I say religions, I don't mean faiths. I don't mean spirituality. I mean religions. I mean Judaism, Islam, and Christianity in a right wing sense. All of them in a right wing sense, in a patriarchal sense.
Hmm.
The non mystical forms of those mainstream traditions of religion, they corrupted the reality we lived in to the point of making us believe that we had no supernatural abilities, that we were eternal sinners, that we were stuck in the reality we were living in, and that we had to be eternally repentant and eternally bowing down in submission to a great God, which is a patriarchal idiot, an evil alien patriarchal man who looks like a humanoid of billions of years old, who would be like an old, creepy, white, decrepit man who's trying to rule the whole world, the same way that an old, creepy, decrepit judge is trying to rule the court, or the same way that an old, creepy, decrepit cop is trying to rape and abuse women or children or whoever it is. So
Where does this corruption actually come from? Like,
to me, the way I described it in an album called Flow of Time, and I think it's an accurate statement. It's possible. It's a hypothetical idea, but I believe that it's possible. It came from a long time ago in an indigenous tribe somewhere. It's possible that someone, because of a correlation between a non-indigenous population somewhere else on the planet, somewhere they might have killed an animal that was too young, that was innocent, that, like they were hunting and they hunted a teenager or a child and they killed them by accident and they ate them. And then in an indigenous tribe, that happened as well. In the indigenous tribe, they might have shunned the person and said, go away. You killed a teenager. You killed a child. You go away. And the person was like, fuck you, you'll regret this. It's like the in the Bible, it would be similar to Cain and Abel.
hmm.
Cain wanting to murder Abel. Like if you think of like a really great indigenous hunter or a really great anywhere on the planet, whether it's indigenous diasporically, let's say a great person who was a great hunter, who always hunted the exact being, the animal would walk away from the flock. The totem, would be like the male totem of a certain age, which didn't have a family and was a single male, would walk away. And then the ultimate hunter, the great hunter, would be like, this is the one. They'd say a prayer, they'd pray, they'd fast, they'd do everything they needed to do, and then they would hunt them according to ritual. But then somebody who was angry and jealous would say, I'm going to go hunt too. I'll be better than him. And then they would find a younger animal and they would hunt the wrong animal and they would want to kill it because they didn't know that, for example, they were doing something wrong. They would say, well, I'm going to hunt an animal. I found this one. This one looks big enough. I'm going to hunt them. And then that would be the start of evil in a sense. Sorry.
Kind of like just like one small action really just in an evolutionary sense just completely changes so much.
Exactly. So
Yeah.
one correlation to that, which is a really good correlation to give for people who are into ancient civilizations. Supposedly, Atlantis and Lemuria started a war which destroyed both Atlantis and Lemuria because of a small situation which is forgotten by history. But I believe it had to do with racism. I believe that Atlantis was more white passing, and Lemuria, if you look at where they came from, Atlantis was in the Atlantic Ocean. It makes sense. It's logical.
Mm.
So the Azores Islands are the remnants of Atlantis. So that's off the coast of Portugal. So in the Atlantis Ocean, you had some people that might have been blue skin, might have been white skin, might have been paler skin, some darker skin too, but mostly blue skin and paler skin. And they were very advanced. And then you had Lemurian people, which were in Malaysia, in the Oceania, in that area. There was a giant continent there. Now, both of them had extremely advanced technologies and knowledge and wisdom and weapons and all of that. Supposedly, they triggered a solar war between each other because of something which they claim in those